Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. I will take advantage of being the only Egyptian in the panel to speak about the foreign factor and mainly, besides the moderator, yes, about US and the Egypt transition or non-transition. And I will focus more about the military-to-military relation and how it affects negatively the transition toward democracy in Egypt. And I will try to avoid what they mentioned about the internal Egyptian politics. I will jump to the US dimension, and quickly I will remind everyone how the relation came to exist after the October War of 1973, when Egypt have dramatic change of its direction from Soviet Eastern Bloc alienation toward the Western American camp. And that was started in 1972 by expelling the thousands of Russian experts and military people in Egypt for no price, actually, at that time. But with the peace with Israel in 1973, Egypt and the United States have reached an equation, a simple one, I believe, aid for cooperation. And Egypt was cornerstone for US strategy in the region. And Egypt was big and have soft power and influence in the region, and the US took advantage of that to force or to push Arab countries to more peace treaties with Israel, and successfully they did achieve it with Jordan and to some extent some Palestinians. And US always claims there is contradiction, or US circles in DC between interest and values in terms of US-American relation, but I believe interest always won. I would claim they mentioned that even till now, because of the moral and ethical dilemma and guilt they feel, but always interest wins over the value and such beautiful words. 9/11 was a very transforming moment of the bilateral relation between Egypt and the United States. It doesn't become strategic as before, because US oriented its foreign policy, and Egypt no exception here, toward counterterrorism. And it was all about what's the root of terrorism, and the debate here, and we remember all Condi Rice, 60 years of supporting dictators, reduced 9/11, so let's go for freedom agenda policy, or they claim freedom agenda, but this was quickly failed with the outcomes of free elections in the Arab world, not only Egypt, when Islamists won in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Egypt, and Tunisia, and Morocco. So it was reversed. And in these years was ups and downs of the Egyptian-American relation, but the strategic nature of it, especially military-to-military relation, was always stable. Some screaming about repression of the regime to some activists like Saadin Ibrahim or others, but it was always strategic. And Obama visited Cairo in 2009 to deliver a speech to the Muslim world, and it was recognition of the role was it. And an interesting date happened, which is the revolution of 25th of January, and US was confused, it doesn't know what to do, but it called for everything except removing Mubarak. They dared to say orderly transition, and it meant accepting the second man of the regime then, which General Omar Suleiman, the head of Egyptian intelligence, to succeed Mubarak, and that was, of course, rejected by millions of Egyptians in the street, and the US goal of orderly transition failed, and it was a wake-up call to them, because what they perceived to understand in Egyptian politics and the Egyptian mindset was completely false. Moving quickly to the moment of the coup of July 3rd, US lost any leverage they have or they claim to have when they don't call it a coup in the night of the July 3rd, 2013. They thought afterward we can influence the behavior of the Egyptian military, and it was false claim from Washington. They called the action is not acceptable, they freeze some aid, and they called for inclusive democracy and transition. That's a phrase used by Obama personally and his team, inclusive democracy, inclusive transition, which meant then for the military to include Muslim Brotherhood in any future planning for transition Egypt, which completely false. And if you know Egypt and the Egyptian military, you will laugh of this claim or call from Washington to be inclusive, to Egyptian regime to be inclusive and including Muslim Brotherhood in the way forward. And they freeze the aid, which was big slap to Egyptian military. They never expected Washington to do that. They take the aid. I will talk about talk about military aid. Economic aid is not worth talking about, really. It's all about military. And they took it for granted, the Egyptian military, because they think they are doing a great job to American interests in the region. Though during Mubarak era, there is a lot of reports about how Washington tried to pressure Egyptian military doctrine to be changed from being oriented toward Israel as the enemy and not having this traditional weapon like F-16 and tanks and warfare in open space, to have it more counterterrorism doctrine, which they succeeded only after the coup to change this doctrine of Egyptian military fighting theme. They freeze the aid for 7-8 months. They resumed it back in April 2014 for no reason. When I asked some officials, Andrew's colleague and other people in the State Department, you freeze the aid after the massacre of Rabaa, you resume it back in April. What happened? What Egyptians did in order to resume the aid back? And the answer was nothing, because really they didn't provide anything to pressure Washington or to seduce Washington to resume the aid. But US resumed it for no return. Other side, inclusive democracy doesn't happen. Repression was all-time high, as we know. Yet I claim Washington resumed the aid with new conditions, with new nature of the military aid, to achieve its strategic goal of reorientation of the military of Egypt, the military doctrine, not to be conventional open warfare against Israel, but to be counterterrorism-oriented military. And that's obviously in the declaration of resuming the aid. 4 points US was giving Egypt the aid based on: first, Sinai; second, counterterrorism; third, maritime security; and fourth one is border control. So nothing to do with the classic warfare Egyptian military was based on, which countered Israel. And they adopted a new tactic, which no more cash flow. US aid was based on cash flow. They gave Egyptian advantage of buying big ticket items like F-16 and others, but the resuming of aid was stopped that from 2018, so Egyptian can't buy big item anymore from the United States based on this philosophy of, or tactic of cash flow. And that achieved as well strategic achievement for US not to allow Egyptian military to be conventional, to get this big item they don't need. For counterterrorism, why you need F-16? That's Washington claim. And in the same time was new word introduced in Washington for the Egyptian military is the biggest Sunni army. That's never been used. Egyptian, if you ask them, the military is Sunnis, they don't know what that's about, but it was used in a lot of circles here in Washington. That's the largest Sunni army, and that was very alarming in Cairo, because that means we have Sunni Shia conflict, and that's not welcomed in Cairo. And in the same time, after resuming the aid, Egypt was not so important in the Middle East troubling map, as we see ISIS and so Egypt was very much marginalized of the serious discussion in Washington. And of course, the terrorism in Sinai was a factor, so Egypt was not able to deliver because of the economic difficulties after the coup and after the revolution, and the Sinai thing. So it was not a big player in the region, and sadly it became dominated by Saudi, by Emirati, Israeli, by Turkey, by Iranian, but not Egyptian anymore. And that gave good reason for the regime to be more repressive, extremely repressive, and it works so far. I believe it's very stable, no existential threat, besides being not active in some aspect, but there is no existential threat domestically or internationally. And the Sisi image and its regime here in Washington is good too. Of course, there is a lobby of NGOs and rights group which always criticizing whoever in Egypt, Mubarak, Morsi, Sisi, but it's always marginalized, and small people in Congress, a few people in Congress here and there. But Sisi's lobbying is doing great here, because it's not only Egyptian lobby, it's Israeli and Emirati and Saudi as well, so it's a very easy target, and they sell good points. Egypt is signed the deal with IMF and the World Bank, and this said it's very encouraging and it's very daring, and they asked other countries to follow Egyptian model of reform economically. Sisi was able to sell falsely, of course, the phrase religious revolution or religious freedom, Islamic freedom, which of course we know is false claim, but it sells well in a lot of circles here in Washington. And of course, the war on terrorism is always welcomed news for Republicans and other people here in Washington. Jumping quickly to Egypt foreign policy, and I observe, and others as well, it's done in secret. Of course, Sisi is intelligent guy from, not intelligent, I mean from the military intelligence unit, and his top aides is from military intelligence as well, and they conduct business in secrecy. We don't know, I will think, what's happening with Egypt military relation with Russia. Does Russia have base in Egypt? Do they ship arms to Egypt? I don't know, but there is reports about it. Egypt relation with North Korea, we know there is something, but we don't know if they comply with US demand to shut the military relation with North Korea. They do it in secret. I don't know if they have military attaché in Cairo or in Pyongyang. I have no clue because they do it in secrecy and they ask Egyptian officials no answer. Sinai is secret policy making, of course. No access to journalists, domestic or foreigner. We don't know what's really going in Sinai besides the statement from the Ministry of Defense, which I will not take it as face value. Egypt decision to hand 2 islands to Saudi Arabia, done in secrecy as well. We don't know the debate internal the military establishment, what happened, who agreed, who not, if it was good or bad, we don't know. It's secrecy as well. And I will say, last month, Egypt signed military agreement with United States called STISMOA. It's communication and security agreement of memorandum of agreement, never approved under Mubarak regime or Morsi or SCAF even, but they signed it last month, and we don't know what's in it, what's allow US to do or access in Egyptian territory. And of course, there is Egyptian nuclear, civilian nuclear reactor in Dab'a, northern coast. It's with Russia. We don't know what's in there because there is loan of $35 billion from Russia, and Russia is not so rich country to give to Egyptians, so don't know the details. It's all done in secrecy. So it's a lot of question mark about Egypt conducting its foreign policy because of the nature of the regime and Sisi personally. And I will end with one question: is a lot of people claiming Egypt is too big to fall, too big country, 100 million people, and have big weight and. However, I believe it won't fail, I see, but because there is no threat. Extreme repression sadly working, no pressure from any foreign power. US doesn't have the will to pressure Egyptian military to be more opening and because there is no interest. Egypt democracy is not US interest, never been and will never have, and every Egyptian kid understands that Sisi will be president forever, and they will never be former president, and we will see what Washington will do, we'll accept it, and the circle will be repeated again. Sisi will stay maybe decades, Mubarak stayed 30 years, no Egyptian expected that, but he did, and unfortunately that maybe will be the scenario with Sisi. Thank you.